The rope around Willow Montgomery's wrists had worn her skin raw, the rough fibers digging deeper with each desperate twist, as the oppressive August heat of 1875 baked the interior of the abandoned corn crib. Through a crack in the weathered boards, she could see the sun beginning its descent over the Kansas prairie, marking her third day of captivity. Willow's throat burned with thirst as she leaned her head against the splintered wall of her prison. The Hargrove family had always been known throughout Harper County for their strict adherence to their own particular brand of religious discipline. But after taking her in as their ward following her parents' death from typhoid fever, they had proven particularly merciless toward her. At 20 years old, she was well past the age when most women in these parts were married with children of their own, but the Hargroves had kept her isolated, treating her more like property than family. Her transgression had been simple yet unforgivable in Silas Hargrove's eyes. She had spoken to the new schoolteacher in town without permission, accepting his offer of a book to read. When Silas discovered the volume of Tennyson's poems hidden beneath her mattress, his rage had been terrible to behold. The corn crib on the edge of their property had become her punishment chamber, a place to contemplate her sins against the natural order, as Silas had put it, before locking her inside 3 days ago. Willow closed her eyes, fighting back tears. The Hargroves had left for a revival meeting in Wichita yesterday, leaving her with just enough water to survive until their return, assuming the heat didn't claim her first. Her head pounded with each heartbeat, and the dizziness that had begun that morning was growing worse. The sudden sound of hoofbeats in the distance made her lift her head. Visitors were rare out here, nearly 2 miles from the main road. Gathering what little strength remained, Willow began to call out, her voice cracking from disuse and dehydration. "Help! Please help me!" The hoofbeats slowed, then quickened as they approached the corn crib. Willow's heart hammered against her ribs as the footsteps drew nearer, then stopped just outside the small structure. "Hello, somebody in there?" A deep male voice, tinged with a Texas drawl, called out. "Yes." "Please, I'm tied up." "The door's locked from the outside," Willow replied, relief and fear mingling in her chest. Strangers could be dangerous in these parts, but dying alone in this corn crib seemed the worse fate. There was a moment of silence, then the sound of something heavy striking the padlock. 3 solid blows later, the lock gave way with a metallic crack. Daylight flooded the small space as the door swung open, temporarily blinding Willow after days in the dimness. When her vision cleared, she found herself looking up at a tall man silhouetted against the setting sun. He wore a wide-brimmed hat and the dust-covered clothes of a traveler. As he stepped into the crib, she could make out his features, weathered skin bronzed by the sun, eyes the color of a summer storm, and a strong jawline partially covered by several days' worth of stubble. "Good Lord," he muttered, crouching beside her when he saw her bound wrists. "Who did this to you, miss?" "The Hargroves," Willow managed. "I'm their ward. They've gone to Wichita for a revival. They won't be back until tomorrow." The man's expression darkened as he pulled a knife from his belt and carefully cut through the ropes binding her wrists. "I'm Tucker Reed," he said, his voice gentler now. "Was riding through to Harper when my horse picked up a stone, saw the farmhouse and thought to ask for water." He paused, gently examining her raw wrists. "Looks like I found something else entirely." When the last of the ropes fell away, Willow tried to stand but swayed dangerously. Tucker caught her before she fell, his strong hand steadying her shoulders. "Easy now," he said. "How long have you been in here?" 3 days, Willow whispered, embarrassment coloring her cheeks despite her desperate situation. "With little water and no food." Tucker's jaw tightened. "That's not punishment, miss. That's cruelty." He looked around the cramped space, taking in the dirt floor and the single beam of sunlight filtering through a crack. "Can you walk?" Willow nodded, though she wasn't entirely sure. "I think so." "Good, because we're leaving. I won't leave you here for those people to find when they return." But Willow hesitated, fear of the unknown warring with her desperate need to escape. "Where would we go?" "The Hargroves are my legal guardians until I'm 21. Tucker regarded her steadily. "How old are you, miss?" 20. "My birthday is in January, and your name?" "Willow." "Willow Montgomery." He nodded once, decision made. "Well, Miss Montgomery, I've got a place about 30 miles from here. It's not much, but it's better than this. You can stay there until you recover and figure out what you want to do next." He paused. "Unless you'd rather I take you to the sheriff in Harper." Willow shook her head quickly. Sheriff Burnett was Silas Hargrove's cousin by marriage and would surely return her to the farm. "No, not the sheriff." Tucker seemed to understand without further explanation. "All right, then. Let's get you some water and something to eat before we ride out." He helped her from the corn crib, supporting her weight when her legs threatened to give way. The late afternoon air felt impossibly fresh after days in the stale confines of her prison. Tucker led her toward a magnificent buckskin horse tethered nearby. "This is Ranger," he said, reaching into his saddlebag and retrieving a canteen. "Drink slow now. Too much at once will make you sick." Willow took the canteen with trembling hands and sipped the water carefully, fighting the urge to gulp it down. The cool liquid sliding down her parched throat felt like salvation itself. "We should gather your belongings," Tucker said, eyeing the farmhouse. "Anything you can't leave behind." Willow thought of the few treasures she had managed to keep hidden from the Hargroves: her mother's locket, her father's pocket watch, and a small book of poetry her mother had read to her as a child. "Yes, but they're hidden in my room. I can get them quickly." Tucker nodded. "I'll come with you." "Don't like the idea of you going in there alone, even if the Hargroves are away." Together they approached the weathered two-story farmhouse. Willow's legs grew stronger with each step, though her head still felt light. Inside, the house was neat to the point of austerity, with plain furnishings and bare walls. Tucker waited in the doorway while Willow hurried to her small room off the kitchen, hardly more than a converted pantry. She quickly retrieved her treasures from their hiding place beneath a loose floorboard, along with her second dress and shawl. There was little else worth taking. The life she had known here had provided shelter, but never comfort or belonging. As they left the house, Willow couldn't help but look back. Despite everything, it had been her home for 5 years. Now she was leaving with a stranger, heading into an unknown future. The thought should have terrified her, but instead, she felt only relief. Tucker helped her onto Ranger, then mounted behind her. His arm circled her waist to keep her steady as they set off, putting distance between themselves and the Hargrove farm as the sun sank lower on the horizon. "We'll ride until dark," Tucker said, his voice close to her ear. "There's a creek about 10 miles from here where we can rest for the night. Tomorrow we'll reach my place by midday." Willow nodded, already feeling the fatigue settling deep in her bones. The steady rhythm of the horse beneath her, and the solid presence of the man behind her, provided an unexpected comfort. She didn't know Tucker Reed, had no reason to trust him beyond the fact that he had freed her from her prison. Yet something told her she was safer with this stranger than she had ever been with the family who had claimed to care for her soul. As they rode across the open prairie with the first stars appearing overhead, Willow felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. The night settled around them like a velvet cloak as Tucker guided Ranger toward the promised creek. Willow had dozed off twice, her body slumping back against Tucker's chest before she startled awake again. The gentle pressure of his arm around her waist had kept her securely in the saddle, but exhaustion was quickly claiming her. "Almost there," Tucker said, his breath warm against her ear. "See those cottonwoods ahead? That's our stopping point." Willow forced her heavy eyelids open. In the deepening twilight, she could make out the silhouettes of several large trees standing sentinel along what must be the creek bed. The prospect of rest and more water renewed her flagging energy. When they reached the trees, Tucker dismounted first, then helped Willow down. Her legs nearly buckled as her feet touched the ground, but his steady hands kept her upright. "Easy now," he murmured. "Let's get you settled before I see the ranger." He led her to a grassy spot beneath one of the larger cottonwoods and helped her sit with her back against the trunk. From his saddlebags, he produced a small bundle wrapped in oilcloth. "It's not much," he said, unwrapping what proved to be jerky and hardtack. "But it'll put something in your stomach until morning." Willow accepted the food gratefully, taking small bites as Tucker had instructed with the water. After 3 days of near starvation, even the plain fare tasted wonderful. She watched as Tucker unsaddled Ranger, rubbed him down, and tethered him where he could reach both grass and water. The practiced efficiency of his movements spoke of years spent on the trail. In the fading light, she could see him more clearly than she had at the farm. He was older than she'd first thought, perhaps 30, with lines at the corners of his eyes that deepened when he smiled. His hands were calloused from work, and he moved with the easy confidence of a man accustomed to relying on himself. When he returned to her side, he carried a small tin cup filled with creek water. "Drink this too," he said, settling beside her. "Need to get you hydrated again." Willow accepted the cup, studying him over its rim. "Why are you helping me, Mr. Reed?" Tucker was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the darkening horizon. "Tucker," he corrected gently, "and I reckon any decent man would have done the same." "I'm not sure that's true," Willow replied. "Most folks around here don't interfere in family matters no matter how." She trailed off, unable to find the right word. "No matter how wrong they are," Tucker finished for her. He shook his head. "Those people had no right to treat you that way. No one does." He paused, then added more softly, "I've seen enough cruelty in this world to last several lifetimes. Don't need to stand by and watch more when I can do something about it." There was something in his voice, a weight of experience that made Willow wonder what he had seen in those lifetimes. But she didn't ask. Everyone out here had stories they preferred not to tell. "Thank you," she said simply. Tucker nodded, accepting her gratitude without further comment. He stood and gathered some dry branches, soon coaxing a small fire to life. The dancing flames pushed back the darkness and took the edge off the night's chill. "You should get some sleep," Tucker said, spreading his bedroll on the ground near the fire. "You can use this. I'll keep watch." "You need rest too," Willow protested. A small smile touched his lips. "Been on the trail a long time, Miss Montgomery." "I can manage a night with little sleep better than you can right now." Too exhausted to argue further, Willow accepted the bedroll and lay down. The ground was hard beneath the thin blanket, but after 3 days sitting on the dirt floor of the corn crib, it felt like luxury. She watched through half-closed eyes as Tucker added another branch to the fire, his profile strong against the flames. "Tucker," she said softly, sleep already pulling at her. "My name is Willow, just Willow." The last thing she saw before sleep claimed her was his small nod of acknowledgement and the gentle expression that softened his weathered features. Willow woke to the smell of coffee and the soft sounds of morning. For a disorienting moment, she couldn't remember where she was or why she felt so stiff. Then the events of the previous day came rushing back: the corn crib, Tucker's arrival, their escape across the prairie. She sat up quickly, wincing at the soreness in her body. The sun was just cresting the horizon, painting the landscape in gold and pink. Tucker crouched by a small fire, pouring coffee from a battered pot into a tin cup. "Morning," he said, glancing up at her. "How are you feeling?" Willow took stock of herself. Her wrists were still raw and painful, her muscles ached, and her head throbbed dully, but compared to yesterday, the improvement was remarkable. "Better," she answered honestly, "though I'd not say good quite yet." Tucker nodded and handed her the cup of coffee. "This should help. Got some bacon, too, if you think your stomach can handle it." The rich aroma of the coffee made Willow's mouth water. She'd rarely been allowed coffee at the Hargrove Farm. Silas considered it a luxury that encouraged idleness. "Thank you. I think I could eat a little." While she sipped the strong brew, Tucker prepared a modest breakfast of bacon and more hardtack softened in the bacon grease. The simple food tasted better than any meal Willow could remember. As they ate, Tucker outlined his plan. "We'll reach my place by midday if we make good time. It's a small spread, nothing fancy, but it's mine-free and clear. Got a creek running through it, decent grazing land, and a cabin that keeps the rain out most days." "You live alone?" Willow asked, immediately regretting the question when she saw something flicker across Tucker's face. "Yes," he answered simply. "Have for some years now." Willow sensed there was more to that story, but she didn't press. Instead, she asked, "What will happen when the Hargroves discover I'm gone?" Tucker considered this as he finished his coffee. "They might search for you, might not. Depends on how much they value having someone to work their farm for free." His gaze met hers, sharp and assessing. "Did they treat you as family at all?" Willow looked down at her hands. "They took me in after my parents died, gave me food and shelter. But no, I wasn't family to them. I was." She searched for the right word. A obligation. A responsibility they fulfilled out of Christian duty, as they reminded me daily. "And the corn crib. Was that the first time they'd punished you that way?" She shook her head. "No, though usually it was only for a night, never 3 days before." Tucker's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice even. "Well, they won't find you at my place. It's far enough away and I keep to myself. Most folks in these parts leave me be." They packed up their small camp quickly, Tucker efficient in every movement. Before helping her onto Ranger, he paused to examine her wrists. "These need tending," he said, his fingers gentle as he turned her hands over. "I've got some salve at the cabin that'll help." The concern in his voice warmed something inside Willow that had grown cold over her years with the Hargroves. She couldn't remember the last time someone had shown genuine care for her well-being. Once mounted, they continued their journey northwest. The morning was pleasant, with a slight breeze tempering the August heat. Willow's strength returned gradually as they rode, though she remained grateful for Tucker's steadying arm around her waist. The landscape changed subtly as they traveled, the flat prairie giving way to gently rolling hills. Clusters of trees marked the courses of streams, and occasionally they spotted cattle grazing in the distance. It was beautiful country, wild and open in a way that made Willow's heart ache with unexpected longing. "Have you lived here long?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence that had settled between them. "About 5 years," Tucker replied. "Came up from Texas after the war, did some droving, saved enough to buy my own place." "You fought in the war." He was quiet for so long that Willow thought he might not answer. Finally, he said, "Yes, Confederate cavalry, not something I talk about much." Willow nodded, understanding. The war had ended 10 years ago, but its shadows still lingered across the country. Her own father had fought for the Union, returning home with a limp and nightmares that had plagued him until his death. "My father was in the 7th Kansas Volunteer Cavalry," she offered. He didn't like to talk about it either. Tucker's arm tightened briefly around her waist, acknowledgement of what remained unspoken between them. Men who had once been enemies were now neighbors, bound by their shared experiences of horror and loss more than divided by the causes for which they had fought. As the sun climbed higher, Tucker pointed to a distant line of trees. "That's Cottonwood Creek. My place is just beyond it. Willow felt a strange mixture of relief and anxiety. She was heading toward safety, yet also toward an unknown future with a man she had known for less than a day. But something about Tucker Reed inspired trust. Perhaps it was the quiet competence with which he had cared for her, or the respect with which he treated her, something she had rarely experienced from any man, much less the Hargroves. They crossed the creek at a shallow ford, the water sparkling in the midday sun. Just beyond, nestled against a gentle rise and sheltered by a stand of cottonwoods, stood a modest cabin with a small barn and corral beside it. A thin curl of smoke rose from the stone chimney, surprising Willow. "Someone's there," she said, tension creeping into her voice. Tucker nodded. "That'll be Wade, my neighbor from up the creek. He checks on the place when I'm gone, makes sure everything's in order." He paused. "Wade's a good man, you can trust him." As they approached, a lean figure emerged from the cabin, a man perhaps a few years older than Tucker, with graying hair and a full beard. He raised a hand in greeting, then stood watching as they rode into the yard. "Tucker Reed," the man called out as they drew closer. "Wasn't expecting you back so soon." His eyes shifted to Willow, curiosity evident in his expression. Tucker dismounted first, then helped Willow down from the saddle. Her legs felt steadier now, though weariness still pulled at her. "Change of plans, Wade," Tucker said, keeping one hand on Willow's elbow to support her. "This is Willow Montgomery. She'll be staying here for a while." Wade's bushy eyebrows rose slightly, but he nodded and touched the brim of his hat. "Madam, pleasure to meet you." "Thank you, Mr. Wade," Willow replied, feeling self-conscious in her dirty dress with her hair in disarray. "Just Wade, madam. No Mr. needed." His eyes took in her condition, the raw wrists, the exhaustion evident in her posture, then shifted to Tucker with an unspoken question. "Found her tied up in a corn crib," Tucker said quietly. "Family that was supposed to be caring for her. Been there 3 days with little water and no food." Wade's weathered face darkened. "Is that so?" He looked at Willow again, his expression gentler now. "Well, you're in good hands with Tucker, best neighbor a man could ask for." He turned back to Tucker. "Got a stew on the fire. Figured you'd be hungry when you got back. There's plenty for both of you." "Appreciate it, Wade." "I'll be on my way then. Alina will be wondering where I've got to." Wade retrieved his horse from the corral and mounted. Before riding off, he paused beside Willow. "My place is just 3 miles upstream if you need anything, madam. Alina would be happy for the company of another woman any time." With that, he touched his hat again and rode away, leaving Willow and Tucker alone at the cabin. "Come on," Tucker said gently. "Let's get you inside and tended to." The interior of the cabin was simple but comfortable, one large room with a stone fireplace, a rough-hewn table with 2 chairs, a bed in one corner, and a small seating area with a rocking chair and a bench covered in a woven blanket. Everything was surprisingly neat and well-maintained. A pot of stew bubbled over the fire, filling the cabin with a savory aroma that made Willow's stomach growl. Tucker guided her to one of the chairs at the table. "Sit and rest," he said. "I'll tend to Ranger, then we'll see to those wrists and get some food in you." Left alone in the cabin, Willow took the opportunity to examine her surroundings more closely. Shelves built into one wall held books more than she would have expected, along with a few personal items. A carved wooden box, a small silver frame containing what appeared to be a tintype, and various household necessities. Everything had its place, speaking of a man who valued order. On the mantel above the fireplace sat a fiddle, its wood polished to a warm glow. The sight of it surprised her. Somehow, she hadn't imagined Tucker as a musician. When he returned a short while later, Willow was still studying the cabin, trying to piece together the man from his possessions. "It's not much," Tucker said, misinterpreting her interest as judgment. but it serves me well enough. It's lovely, Willow replied honestly. It feels like a home. Something in Tucker's expression softened at her words. He moved to a trunk at the foot of the bed and retrieved a small tin. Let's see to those wrists now. He pulled the second chair close to hers and gently took her hands in his. The salve he applied smelled of herbs and beeswax, cooling the burning sensation that had plagued her since her captivity began. His touch was careful, almost reverent as he worked. This should help with the healing, he said, his voice low. Might still scar some, but the pain should ease soon. Willow watched his face as he concentrated on his task. Up close, she could see the fine lines around his eyes, testament to years spent squinting against the sun. A small scar bisected his left eyebrow and another marked his jawline just below his ear. His hands, though work roughened, moved with surprising delicacy. There, he said finally, releasing her hands. How does that feel? Better, Willow replied, flexing her wrists carefully. Thank you. Tucker nodded and rose to check the stew. He ladled generous portions into 2 bowls and placed one before her along with a chunk of bread. Wade's a fine cook, he said, settling into the chair across from her. Better than me by a fair stretch. The stew was rich with beef, potatoes, and carrots, seasoned perfectly. Willow ate slowly, savoring each bite and the simple pleasure of a proper meal after days of deprivation. Tucker ate in companionable silence, occasionally refilling her water cup from a pitcher on the table. When they had finished, Tucker cleared the dishes, refusing Willow's offer to help. You need rest more than I need clean dishes, he said firmly. But first, we should discuss arrangements. He returned to the table, his expression serious. I know this isn't what you expected, and I don't want you to feel trapped here any more than you were at the Hargroves. He paused, choosing his words carefully. I can make up a bed for myself in the barn. You'll have privacy in the cabin. Willow flushed. In her exhaustion and relief at escaping the Hargroves, she hadn't considered the propriety of their situation. I can't take your bed, Tucker. This is your home. And you're my guest, he replied simply. Besides, I've slept in far worse places than my own barn. Before she could protest further, he continued, Tomorrow or the next day, when you're stronger, we can ride to town. There's a widow there, Mrs. Hollister, who sometimes needs help with sewing and such. Might be she could use your assistance, give you a place to stay that's more suitable. The thought of being passed to yet another household made Willow's chest tighten with anxiety. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. Tucker's gaze was steady. Offering honest work for fair payment isn't being a burden, Willow. It's being a person of value. The way he said it as though her worth as a human being was an indisputable fact made something inside her ache. The Hargroves had always made her feel that her very existence was an imposition, a drain on their Christian charity. I can cook, she said suddenly, and clean and sew. I'm good with gardens too. I could earn my keep here if you'd allow it, just until I find something more permanent. Tucker studied her for a long moment. This arrangement would cause talk in town, he said finally. Might make things difficult for you. I'm used to difficult, Willow replied, lifting her chin. And I'd rather face gossip than be sent away to strangers again. A small smile touched Tucker's lips. You've got spirit, I'll give you that. He seemed to consider her proposal, then nodded once. All right. You can stay, at least until you're fully recovered and we figure out something better, but I'm still sleeping in the barn. Relief washed through Willow. Thank you. Tucker rose from the table. I need to see to some chores. You should rest. There's clean water in the pitcher if you want to wash up, and he hesitated, then crossed to a trunk near the bed and retrieved a shirt and a pair of trousers. These might be big on you, but they're clean. Might be more comfortable than that dress while we get it washed. Willow accepted the clothes, touched by his thoughtfulness. Thank you, Tucker, for everything. He nodded once, then left the cabin, giving her the privacy to wash and change. The shirt indeed swallowed her, falling nearly to her knees, but the clean cotton felt wonderful against her skin. After washing as best she could with the basin of water, Willow finally allowed herself to lie down on Tucker's bed. The straw-filled mattress was firm but comfortable, the blankets clean and smelling faintly of the outdoors, as though they had been dried in the sun and wind. Despite the strangeness of her surroundings and the uncertainty of her future, Willow felt safer than she had in years. As she drifted toward sleep, her last conscious thought was of Tucker's gentle hands tending her wounds and the quiet dignity with which he had offered her sanctuary. The next few days established a rhythm to their shared life at the cabin. True to his word, Tucker slept in the barn, returning to the cabin each morning to build up the fire before Willow woke. They shared breakfast, usually cornmeal mush or biscuits with bacon, before Tucker headed out to tend to his small herd of cattle or work on various projects around the property. Willow gradually regained her strength and took over more of the household tasks. She found comfort in the familiar routines of cooking and cleaning, satisfaction in bringing order and care to Tucker's simple home. Though they had known each other only a short time, a companionable ease developed between them, punctuated by moments of surprising connection. On the third evening, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the prairie in shades of gold and crimson, Tucker finally asked about her past. "Your parents," he began. "You said they died of typhoid." Willow nodded, her fingers absently tracing the outline of her mother's locket which hung around her neck. 5 years ago, there was an outbreak in our settlement near Fort Scott. My father went first, then my mother just 3 days later. The memory still carried a sharp edge of pain. I was 15. The Hargroves were distant relations on my mother's side, second cousins or some such. They were the only family willing to take me in. Tucker was quiet for a moment, his gaze fixed on the horizon. And before that, what was your life like? The question brought a sad smile to Willow's lips. Different. My father was a schoolteacher before the war and my mother taught piano. Our home was full of books and music. She glanced at the fiddle she had seen on the mantel. They believed in education for girls just as much as boys. I was learning Latin when they died. Tucker looked impressed. Latin? That's not common schooling for anyone out here, let alone a young woman. The Hargroves put a stop to it, Willow said, unable to keep the bitterness from her voice. Silas said it was unnatural for a woman to fill her head with such things, that it would make me unfit for my proper duties. And what do you think your proper duties are? Tucker asked, his tone carefully neutral. Willow considered the question. I think we all have a duty to use whatever gifts we've been given, to learn and grow and contribute something worthwhile to the world. She hesitated, then added more softly. My mother used to say that a mind is like a garden. It will grow something no matter what, either flowers and fruit or weeds. The choice of what to cultivate is ours. Tucker's expression softened. Your mother sounds like a wise woman. She was, Willow agreed. I miss her wisdom, her kindness. They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky and stars began to appear. Finally, Tucker spoke again, his voice low. My wife would have liked you, I think. The simple statement caught Willow by surprise. Tucker had made no mention of a wife before. Your wife, she echoed softly. He nodded, his profile outlined against the darkening sky. Rebecca. She died 6 years ago, childbirth. The words were stark, unadorned with sentiment, yet Willow could hear the pain beneath them. I'm so sorry, Tucker. He acknowledged her sympathy with a slight nod. The baby, too, a little girl, never even had a chance to name her properly. Willow's heart ached for him. Is that why you came north from Texas? Partly. Couldn't bear to stay where everything reminded me of them. joined a cattle drive heading up to Abilene, then just kept moving until I found this place." He gestured toward the darkened landscape. "Something about this land spoke to me, the openness of it, the possibility." Willow understood. She had felt something similar when they had first ridden onto his property, a sense of potential, of space in which to breathe and grow. "You still play?" she asked, nodding toward the cabin where the fiddle rested. A small smile touched Tucker's lips. "Sometimes." Rebecca loved music. She could play piano like an angel. "After she died, I couldn't bear to touch the fiddle for almost 2 years." He paused. "But then one night, I picked it up and played her favorite song. Felt like she could hear it somehow." The vulnerability in his admission touched something deep within Willow. This man, who appeared so self-contained and capable, had known profound loss too. Perhaps that was why he had stopped to help her, because he understood what it meant to be alone in the world. "Would you play something now?" she asked softly. Tucker seemed surprised by the request, but after a moment's hesitation, he nodded and rose. "Might be a bit rusty," he warned as he returned to the cabin. When he emerged with the fiddle, Willow felt a small thrill of anticipation. Tucker settled back into his chair, tested the strings with gentle fingers, and began to play. The melody that flowed from the instrument was sweet and melancholy, floating across the prairie night like a living thing. Tucker played with his eyes closed, his body swaying slightly with the rhythm. The music spoke of longing and memory, of love and loss, in a way that words never could. Willow found herself transfixed, tears gathering in her eyes at the beauty of it. When the last note faded into silence, neither of them spoke for several minutes, unwilling to break the spell the music had cast. "That was beautiful," Willow finally whispered. "What was it called?" Tucker carefully laid the fiddle across his lap. "A Shockin' Farewell. Rebecca loved it." He looked out into the darkness. "It's strange. For years after she died, playing her favorite songs hurt too much. Now it feels like keeping her memory alive." "It is," Willow assured him. "Through your music, you're sharing her with the world still." Tucker's gaze shifted to her face, his expression softening in the dim light from the cabin windows. "You have a way with words, Willow Montgomery." She smiled, feeling a warmth that had nothing to do with the summer night. "My father's influence. He believed words were as essential as air." "Smart man," Tucker replied, then rose, cradling the fiddle carefully. "It's getting late. We should turn in." As they had each night, they bid each other good night at the cabin door, Tucker heading to his makeshift bed in the barn, Willow remaining in the cabin. But tonight, something had shifted between them, a deeper understanding taking root through their shared confidences. As Willow prepared for bed, she found herself thinking of Tucker's story of the wife and child he had lost, of the music he played to honor their memory. She thought too of his kindness to her, a stranger he had rescued on impulse, but now treated with unfailing respect and consideration. For the first time since her parents' deaths, Willow felt she had found someone who saw her as she truly was, not as a burden to be endured or shaped to others' expectations, but as a person of value, just as Tucker had said. With that comforting thought, she drifted into a peaceful sleep. The following week brought subtle changes to their arrangement. Willow's strength returned fully, and with it came a determination to contribute meaningfully to the household. She took over the cooking entirely, much to Tucker's evident satisfaction, and began to put her own touch on the cabin, arranging wildflowers in a jar on the table, organizing the shelves more efficiently, adding small details that softened the bachelor austerity of the space. Tucker, for his part, seemed to appreciate her efforts without comment, though she occasionally caught him looking at the changes with a faint smile. He continued to sleep in the barn, despite Willow's protests that it couldn't be comfortable. "I've slept on rocky ground in the rain," he told her one morning when she raised the subject again. The barn is luxury by comparison. They settled into a routine that felt surprisingly natural. During the day, Tucker worked his land while Willow tended to the cabin, the small kitchen garden, and the few chickens that provided eggs. In the evenings, they shared meals and conversation on the porch, watching the sunset and occasionally discussing plans for her future. Wade mentioned that Mrs. Hollister in town is still looking for help with her sewing, Tucker said one evening. If you're interested, we could ride in tomorrow. It would give you options. Willow nodded, though the thought of leaving the safety and peace she had found at Tucker's cabin filled her with a strange reluctance. That would be sensible, she agreed. I can't impose on your hospitality forever. Tucker's gaze shifted to her face. You're not imposing, Willow. But I understand you might want more independence than staying here can offer. There was something in his tone, a careful neutrality that made Willow wonder if he too felt reluctant about the prospect of her leaving. But before she could pursue that thought, the sound of approaching horses drew their attention. Tucker stood, his posture alert but not alarmed. That'll be Wade and Alina, he said. They mentioned they might stop by today. Sure enough, two riders soon appeared, Wade on his bay gelding and beside him a woman on a dappled mare. Alina Wade was perhaps 50, with streaks of gray in her dark hair and laugh lines around her eyes. She greeted Willow warmly as Wade helped her dismount. So good to finally meet you, my dear, Alina said, clasping Willow's hands in her own. Wade's told me about your situation. I'm so glad Tucker found you when he did. There was no pity in her voice, only genuine concern, which Willow appreciated. Thank you, Mrs. Wade. I'm grateful for your husband's kindness as well. Alina, please, the older woman insisted. We're neighbors here, not strangers at a church social. They settled on the porch, Tucker bringing out coffee for the adults and offering Wade a small measure of whiskey, which he accepted with a nod of thanks. The conversation flowed easily, talk of weather and crops, local news and shared acquaintances. Willow found herself relaxing in the comfortable atmosphere, appreciating the normalcy of it after years of tension in the Hargrove household. We're heading into town tomorrow, Tucker mentioned as the evening progressed. Thought Willow might speak with Mrs. Hollister about work. Alina's eyebrows rose slightly. Abigail Hollister, the seamstress, Tucker nodded. Wade mentioned she was looking for help. Alina and Wade exchanged a glance that Willow couldn't quite interpret. She is, Alina confirmed. But she hesitated, looking at Willow with motherly concern. Abigail can be somewhat particular about who she employs, and her accommodations for live-in help are rather Spartan. What Alina's trying to say, Wade added, is that Abigail works her help hard for little pay and less thanks. Not sure it would be the best situation for you, Miss Willow. Willow's heart sank. She had few skills that would translate to employment in a small prairie town and fewer options for respectable housing. I appreciate your candor, she said, but I need to find some way to support myself. I can't rely on Tucker's charity indefinitely. It's not charity, Tucker said quietly, his gaze meeting hers across the porch. Never that. A moment of silence followed his words, heavy with unspoken meaning. Alina looked between them, a knowing expression crossing her face. Well, she said briskly, there's no need to rush into anything. Willow, why don't you come visit us tomorrow instead? I could use help with my preserving. The peaches are coming in faster than I can manage alone. We can discuss other possibilities while we work. The invitation was clearly sincere, and Willow found herself smiling. I'd like that very much, Alina. Thank you. The Wades stayed another hour, the conversation turning to lighter topics. Alina proved to have a lively sense of humor that drew genuine laughter from Tucker, a sound Willow realized she had rarely heard from him. It transformed his face, softening the lines and warming his eyes in a way that made her heart beat a little faster. When the Wades finally departed, promising to expect Willow the following morning, a comfortable silence settled between her and Tucker as they cleared away the coffee cups. "They're good people," Willow said as they worked. "You're fortunate to have such neighbors." Tucker nodded. "Rare to find folks who mind their own business but still care about others. The Wades manage it better than most." They finished the cleanup and stepped back onto the porch. The night was clear, stars scattered across the velvet sky like diamonds on black cloth. A crescent moon hung low on the horizon, casting just enough light to silhouette the landscape. "Beautiful night," Tucker observed, his voice low. "Yes," Willow agreed, wrapping her shawl more tightly around her shoulders against the slight chill. "I never tire of this view." Tucker glanced at her. "You like it here, then?" Despite everything, the question seemed to hold more weight than its simple words suggested. Willow considered her answer carefully. "I do," she said finally. "There's a peace here I haven't known in a long time, a sense of." She searched for the right word, possibility. Tucker's expression softened. "That's what I felt when I first saw this land, like I could breathe again. Start fresh." Their eyes met in the darkness, and something passed between them, an understanding, a recognition of shared experience despite their different paths. "I should get some rest if I'm to visit Alina tomorrow," Willow said finally, breaking the moment before it became too intense. Tucker nodded. "I'll saddle Daisy for you in the morning. She's gentle enough for the ride to the Wades." Daisy was Tucker's second horse, an older mare with a calm disposition. Willow had ridden her several times around the property, gradually regaining her confidence in the saddle. "Thank you, Tucker, for everything." He tipped his hat slightly, a gesture that had become familiar and endearing. "Sleep well, Willow." As she prepared for bed that night, Willow found herself thinking about the future with both hope and uncertainty. The prospect of work with Mrs. Hollister no longer seemed appealing, especially given the Wade's assessment of the situation. But what alternatives did she have? She couldn't remain dependent on Tucker indefinitely, no matter how comfortable their arrangement had become. And there was another concern. One she was reluctant to acknowledge even to herself, the growing awareness of Tucker as more than just her rescuer and benefactor. The warmth she felt in his presence, the way her pulse quickened when their hands accidentally touched, the comfort she found in their evening conversations, these feelings were dangerous, inappropriate given their circumstances. Tucker had offered her shelter out of kindness, not romantic interest. He had loved his wife deeply. Willow had heard it in his voice when he spoke of Rebecca, seen it in his face when he played the fiddle. It would be foolish to imagine he might come to care for her in that way. With these troubled thoughts circling in her mind, Willow finally drifted into an uneasy sleep. The morning dawned clear and warm, promising another beautiful late summer day. True to his word, Tucker had Daisy saddled and ready by the time Willow finished breakfast. He handed her a small package wrapped in cloth. "Biscuits for Alina," he explained. "Poor trade for taking you off my hands for the day, but it's something." The teasing note in his voice made Willow smile. "I'm sure she'll consider it more than fair payment." "These biscuits are better than anything I've tasted since my mother's." "High praise," Tucker replied, his eyes crinkling at the corners, "though I suspect your cooking has more to do with their quality than my recipe." The compliment warmed her as she mounted Daisy. Tucker gave her directions to the Wade farm, though it was a simple route. Follow the creek upstream for about 3 miles, until she saw the white farmhouse set back from the water. "Enjoy your day," Tucker said as she prepared to leave. "And Willow." He hesitated, something unreadable in his expression. "You're welcome here as long as you want to stay. I hope you know that." The simple statement touched her deeply. "Thank you, Tucker. That means more than I can say." With a final nod, She urged Daisy forward, setting off along the creek path toward the Wade's farm. The morning was glorious, the air fresh and sweet with the scent of prairie flowers. Birds called from the trees along the creek, and twice Willow spotted deer drinking at the water's edge. The ride gave her time to think about Tucker's parting words. They seemed to suggest he wasn't eager for her to find other arrangements, that perhaps he enjoyed her presence as much as she enjoyed his. But was that merely wishful thinking on her part? The Wade farmhouse came into view sooner than expected, a tidy white two-story with a broad porch and flower beds blooming with late summer colors. Alina must have been watching for her, because she appeared on the porch waving as Willow approached. "You made it," she called. "Come in, come in. The coffee's hot, and I've just taken a pie from the oven." The warm welcome set the tone for the day. Alina proved to be as kind as she was practical, showing Willow around the comfortable farmhouse before setting her to work helping with the peach preserves. As they worked, Alina shared stories of her life on the frontier, her marriage to Wade 30 years earlier, their journey west from Pennsylvania, the challenges and joys of building a life in Kansas. "It wasn't easy," she admitted as they filled jars with the golden preserves. "Especially those first years. Drought, grasshoppers, winter storms that nearly buried the house. But we survived." Her eyes twinkled. "More than survived, we thrived." Willow could see the truth of that in the prosperity evident throughout the farm, the well-tended fields, the sturdy barn, the comfortable furnishings in the house. The Wades had worked hard, and it showed. "And you and Wade have been neighbors with Tucker since he arrived?" Willow asked, trying to sound casual. Alina nodded, a knowing look in her eyes. 5 years now. He was in a bad way when he first came, grieving his wife and child, something fierce. Hardly spoke to anyone for months." She paused in her work, her expression softening. "But time heals, or at least it helps. And Tucker's a good man beneath that quiet exterior, never hesitates to lend a hand when needed." "He saved my life," Willow said simply. "Yes, he did," Alina agreed. "And I think perhaps you've done something similar for him, though in a different way." Before Willow could ask what she meant, Alina changed the subject, bringing up the matter of employment alternatives to Mrs. Hollister's sewing shop. "The school teacher in Harper is leaving at the end of the month," she said. "Getting married and moving to Topeka. They'll need someone to finish the term until Christmas at least." She eyed Willow speculatively. "You mentioned your father was a teacher. Did he share his knowledge with you?" Willow's heart quickened at the possibility. "Yes, extensively. And my mother taught me as well. I was well versed in literature, mathematics, history, even some Latin before." She trailed off, not wanting to dwell on the years with the Hargroves. "Before those people decided education wasn't suitable for a young woman," Alina finished for her, a hint of disapproval in her voice. "Well, their loss might be Harper's gain. The school board is desperate. Classes start in 2 weeks. If you're interested, Wade could speak to them on your behalf." The opportunity seemed almost too perfect a chance to use the education her parents had given her, to be independent while doing something meaningful. "I would be very interested," Willow said, unable to keep the excitement from her voice. Alina beamed. "Wonderful. I'll tell Wade when he comes in for dinner. He's on the school board himself, so his recommendation carries weight." She patted Willow's hand. "And in the meantime, you're welcome to stay with us if you'd prefer not to remain at Tucker's, though." She paused, her expression turning thoughtful. "I get the sense you're not uncomfortable there." Willow felt a blush rising to her cheeks. "Tucker has been nothing but respectful and kind. He sleeps in the barn to preserve my reputation." "I didn't imagine otherwise," Alina assured her. "Tucker Reed is a gentleman through and through." She studied Willow's face. "And perhaps something more to you." The directness of the question took Willow by surprise. I don't know what you mean." Alina's smile was gentle. I think you do, my dear. I saw the way you looked at him last night. And more tellingly, I saw the way he looked at you when he thought no one was watching. Willow's heart stuttered. How did he look at me? Like a man seeing the sunrise after a very long night, Alina replied simply. The image struck Willow deeply. Could it be true? Had Tucker begun to care for her as she had for him? Even if that were true, she said carefully, it's too soon. He still grieves his wife. Alina considered this as she sealed the last jar of preserves. Grief doesn't end, Willow, it changes, becomes part of you rather than all of you. She wiped her hands on her apron. Tucker will always love Rebecca, but that doesn't mean his heart is closed forever. They moved on to other topics as they cleaned up the kitchen, but Alina's words stayed with Willow throughout the afternoon. When Wade returned from the fields, Alina shared Willow's interest in the teaching position, and he immediately expressed his support. I'll speak to the board tomorrow, he promised. They're meeting at the church to discuss candidates, though I don't think they have any yet. Your experience and education would be most welcome. By the time Willow prepared to return to Tucker's cabin in the late afternoon, she felt both excited about the possibility of teaching and unsettled by her conversation with Alina about Tucker. The older woman's parting words only added to her confusion. Follow your heart, my dear, Alina said as she embraced Willow. It rarely leads us astray, even when the path seems uncertain. The ride back along the creek gave Willow time to sort through her thoughts. The teaching position seemed like a gift from Providence, a chance to use her education and support herself honorably. If she secured the position, she would need to find lodging in Harper, which was nearly 10 miles from Tucker's cabin. The distance would provide clarity, perhaps, but the thought of leaving brought an unexpected pang of sadness. As for Alina's observations about Tucker's feelings, Willow hardly dared consider them. She had known Tucker for less than 2 weeks. The connection she felt with him might be nothing more than gratitude on her part and kindness on his. To imagine it as something deeper seemed presumptuous at best, foolish at worst. Yet as Tucker's cabin came into view, Willow's heart quickened in a way that had nothing to do with the gentle exertion of the ride. He was working in the corral, training a young colt, but paused and waved when he spotted her approaching. The simple gesture of welcome felt like coming home. How was your day with Alina? Tucker asked as he helped her dismount, his hands strong and steady at her waist. Wonderful, Willow replied, finding herself reluctant to step away from his touch. She's a remarkable woman. We put up 12 jars of peach preserves, and she's promised to teach me her pickle recipe next time. Tucker smiled, leading Daisy toward the barn. Sounds like you two got on well. Alina doesn't share that pickle recipe with just anyone. Willow followed him, watching as he unsaddled the mare and began rubbing her down. She and Wade mentioned something else too, she said, trying to keep her voice casual. The school teacher in Harper is leaving at the end of the month. They're looking for someone to finish the term. Tucker's hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. Is that so? Wade thinks I might be qualified, given my education. He's on the school board and offered to recommend me. Willow studied Tucker's profile, trying to gauge his reaction. The position would mean moving to Harper, of course. Tucker nodded, his expression unreadable. Harper's a decent town, growing, would be a good opportunity for you. His neutral response was not what Willow had hoped for, though she wasn't sure what she had expected. Some indication, perhaps, that the prospect of her leaving affected him in some way. Yes, I think it would be, she agreed, disappointment coloring her tone despite her efforts to hide it. Tucker finished with Daisy and turned to face Willow directly. Is that what you want, to teach in Harper? The question seemed to hold more weight than its simple words suggested. Willow considered her answer carefully. I want to use the education my parents gave me, she said finally, to be independent, to build a life that's my own." She paused, then added more softly, "But I've come to feel at home here too in a way I didn't expect." Something shifted in Tucker's expression, a softening around the eyes, a slight parting of his lips as though he might say more. But instead, he simply nodded and said, "Whatever you decide, I'll support it." The moment stretched between them, filled with unspoken words. Finally, Tucker broke the silence. "Come on. You must be hungry after your day of preserving. I've got a rabbit stew simmering that might not be up to your standards, but it's hot at least." The evening passed pleasantly enough, with Willow sharing more details of her day with the Wades and Tucker telling her about his progress with the young colt. But beneath the ordinary conversation, Willow sensed a new tension and awareness that things were changing, that decisions would soon need to be made. As they sat on the porch after dinner, watching the stars emerge in the darkening sky, Tucker finally returned to the subject of the teaching position. "When will Wade speak to the school board?" he asked. "Tomorrow," Willow replied. "They're meeting at the church in Harper." Tucker nodded. "I have business in town day after tomorrow. Could take you with me if you'd like to see the school. Might help you decide if it's what you want." The offer seemed to suggest he was reconciled to the idea of her leaving, which brought a fresh wave of disappointment. "Thank you. That would be helpful." They lapsed into silence again, the night sounds of the prairie filling the space between them, crickets chirping, the distant howl of a coyote, the soft rustling of wind through the cottonwoods by the creek. "I played the fiddle for Rebecca every evening," Tucker said suddenly, his voice low. "It was our ritual. After supper, we'd sit on the porch of our little house in Texas, and I'd play while she sewed or just listened." He paused, his gaze fixed on some distant point in the darkness. "After she died, I couldn't bear to touch it. Felt like a betrayal somehow to make music when she couldn't hear it anymore." Willow remained silent, sensing he needed to speak without interruption. "The night I played for you," he continued, "was the first time it felt right again. Like the music was a gift I could still give, not just to her memory, but to—" He hesitated. "To the future, maybe." The simple admission touched Willow deeply. "Tucker," she began, not sure what she wanted to say, but feeling she needed to respond to his vulnerability with her own. Before she could continue, the sound of approaching riders interrupted the moment. Tucker stood, instantly alert, his hand moving to the rifle that always stood near the door. "Not expecting anyone," he said, his voice tense. "Stay here." He stepped off the porch, rifle in hand, as three riders emerged from the darkness. Even in the dim light from the cabin windows, Willow could make out the rigid set of Tucker's shoulders as he recognized the lead rider. "Hargrove," he said, his voice flat and cold. Silas Hargrove sat atop his bay horse, flanked by his two eldest sons, Ezra and John. All three men carried rifles, though they weren't raised. Yet, "Raid," Silas acknowledged, his gaze shifting to Willow on the porch. "I see you've got something that belongs to me." Tucker's posture didn't change, but something in his stance became more dangerous. "Willow doesn't belong to anyone, Hargrove, least of all a man who'd leave her to die in a corn crib." Silas's face darkened. "That's a family matter, not your concern. The girl is my ward until she's 21. Law's on my side. Law doesn't allow for starving and binding people," Tucker replied evenly. "Sheriff might have something to say about that." A cruel smile touched Silas's thin lips. "Sheriff Burnett, my wife's cousin. I doubt he'd take the word of a girl known for her willful disobedience over that of a God-fearing family man." Tucker's grip on his rifle tightened, but his voice remained steady. "You should leave now, Hargrove. Willow stays here of her own free will." Silas exchanged glances with his sons, who had been slowly spreading out, flanking Tucker. "We're not leaving without the girl. She has duties to fulfill, lessons to learn about obedience and gratitude." "No." The word escaped Willow's lips before she could stop it. She stepped off the porch, moving to stand beside Tucker despite his warning glance. "I'm not going back with you, Silas, not ever." Silas's expression hardened. "You have no choice, girl. You're underage and under my guardianship." "I'm 20 years old," Willow replied, finding courage in Tucker's solid presence beside her. "Old enough to make my own decisions, and I choose not to return to a home where I was treated worse than livestock." "You ungrateful," Silas began, but Tucker cut him off. "That's enough," he said, his voice deadly quiet. "You've heard the lady. She's not going with you. Now get off my land before this turns ugly." Ezra Hargrove, the elder son, spat on the ground. "3 against 1, Reed. You think you can stop us?" Tucker's gaze never wavered. "I think you boys should ask your pa about the war, about men who fought with Terry's Texas Rangers. Then decide if these are odds you like." Something in Tucker's tone, a cold certainty, made Ezra hesitate. Silas studied Tucker's face for a long moment, then slowly nodded. "This isn't over, Reed," he said. "The girl is my responsibility until January. I won't let this rest." "She's not your anything," Tucker replied. "And if you or your boys come back here, you'd best be prepared for what happens next." The threat hung in the air between them. Finally, Silas reined his horse around. "Come on, boys. We'll settle this proper-like through the law." The 3 riders departed the way they had come, disappearing into the darkness. Only when the sound of hoofbeats had faded completely did Tucker lower his rifle. "You all right?" he asked Willow, his voice gentle again. She nodded, though her heart was still racing. "Yes, thank you for standing with me." Tucker's expression was grim. "He's right about one thing legally. You're still his ward until you turn 21. If he goes to the sheriff, it could get complicated." "What should we do?" Willow asked, fear beginning to replace the adrenaline that had sustained her during the confrontation. Tucker considered for a moment. "We'll ride into Harper tomorrow, not wait for the day after. Need to speak with Judge Wilson before Hargrove can make his case to the sheriff." He placed a reassuring hand on her shoulder. "Don't worry, I won't let them take you back there." The simple promise brought tears to Willow's eyes. In all her years with the Hargroves, no one had ever stood up for her, protected her, valued her wishes above convenience or convention. "Tucker," she said, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't know how to thank you." His expression softened as he looked down at her. "No thanks needed. Just doing what any decent man would do." But they both knew it was more than that, more than simple decency that had led him to defy Silas Hargrove, more than obligation that had made him promise to protect her. "We should get some rest," Tucker said finally. "Tomorrow will be a long day." As they prepared to retire for the night, Tucker to the barn, Willow to the cabin, the air between them seemed charged with unspoken feelings and new urgency. The confrontation with Silas had changed things, accelerating decisions that might otherwise have evolved more slowly. "Will you be safe in the barn?" Willow asked as Tucker prepared to leave. "What if the Hargroves come back?" "They won't," Tucker replied with quiet confidence. "Not tonight. Silas is many things, but he's not a fool. He'll try the legal route first." He paused at the door. "But I'll keep watch, just the same. Lock the door behind me." Willow nodded, though the thought of Tucker spending the night on guard rather than resting troubled her. "Be careful," she said softly. Tucker's eyes met hers, and for a moment, all the things they hadn't said seemed to hang in the air between them. Then he nodded once and stepped outside into the night. Willow locked the door as instructed and prepared for bed, though she doubted sleep would come easily. The day had been a pendulum of emotions: hope for the teaching position, confusion about her feelings for Tucker, fear at the Hargroves' arrival, and now a strange mixture of dread and anticipation about what the next day might bring. As she lay in Tucker's bed, staring at the ceiling, She realized that whatever happened in Harper tomorrow would determine not just her legal status, but the course of her future and perhaps Tucker's as well. The morning dawned clear and cool, a hint of autumn in the air despite the August date. Tucker was already up and preparing the horses when Willow emerged from the cabin, having slept fitfully at best. "Any sign of the Hargroves?" she asked, accepting the cup of coffee he offered. Tucker shook his head. "All quiet, but we should get an early start nonetheless. It's a 2-hour ride to Harper." They ate a quick breakfast, then Tucker helped Willow mount Daisy while he rode Ranger. The journey to Harper was largely silent, both of them preoccupied with their own thoughts and the uncertainty that lay ahead. Harper was a growing town, with several blocks of businesses surrounding a central square. The courthouse, a 2-story brick building with white columns, dominated one side of the square. Tucker led the way there, tying the horses at a hitching post out front. "Judge Wilson holds court on Tuesday mornings," he explained as they climbed the steps. "With luck, he'll see us before Hargrove can make his case to the sheriff." The interior of the courthouse was cool and quiet, the high ceilings and tall windows creating an atmosphere of dignified calm. Tucker spoke briefly with a clerk, who directed them to a bench outside the judge's chambers. "He's reviewing documents now," the clerk informed them, "but he'll see you before court convenes at 10. They sat side by side on the hard wooden bench, waiting. Willow's hands twisted nervously in her lap until Tucker gently covered them with one of his own. "It'll be all right," he said quietly. "Judge Wilson is a fair man. He'll hear you out." Willow nodded, drawing strength from his confidence and the warmth of his hand on hers. "What exactly are we asking him for?" "Emancipation," Tucker replied. "Legal recognition that you're capable of managing your own affairs despite being under 21. It's not common for women, but given the circumstances." He trailed off as the door to the judge's chambers opened and a balding man in a black suit emerged. "Mr. Reid," the judge acknowledged. "The clerk says you have an urgent matter to discuss." Tucker stood, respectfully removing his hat. "Yes, Your Honor, this is Miss Willow Montgomery. We need your help with a delicate situation." Judge Wilson's shrewd eyes assessed Willow before he nodded. "Come in, both of you." Inside the chambers, the judge listened attentively as Tucker explained the situation: Willow's status as the Hargroves' ward, the abuse she had suffered, Tucker's intervention, and their concern that Silas would attempt to force her return through legal means. When Tucker finished, the judge turned to Willow. "Is this all true, Miss Montgomery? You understand the seriousness of these allegations?" "Yes, Your Honor," Willow replied, meeting his gaze steadily. "Every word. The Hargroves took me in after my parents died of typhoid 5 years ago. At first they were strict but not cruel, but as time passed..." She hesitated, then pushed on. "Silas became more controlling, more punitive. The corn crib was his favorite punishment, but there were others: withholding food, forcing me to kneel on dried corn kernels for hours, restricting my movement and my access to books or any education." The judge's expression remained neutral, but something in his eyes suggested he believed her. "And you are now 20 years of age?" "Yes, sir. I'll be 21 in January." Judge Wilson steepled his fingers, considering. "The law typically recognizes the authority of guardians until a ward reaches 21. However, there are exceptions in cases of demonstrated cruelty or when a young person shows the maturity and capability to manage their own affairs." He looked at Willow again. "Do you have any skills or means to support yourself, Miss Montgomery?" Willow straightened her shoulders. "I'm well educated, Your Honor. My father was a schoolteacher, and both my parents ensured I received a thorough education before their deaths. I understand the school board in Harper is seeking a teacher to complete the current term. Mr. Wade has offered to recommend me for the position." This information seemed to interest the judge. Walter Wade, he's a respected member of this community. Yes, sir. He and his wife have been very kind to me. Judge Wilson nodded thoughtfully, then turned to Tucker. And your interest in this matter, Mr. Reed? You're not related to Miss Montgomery, I understand. Tucker met the judge's gaze directly. No, sir. I found her in that corn crib by chance. Couldn't leave her there to suffer. Since then, she's been staying at my property while recovering and considering her options. A slight rise of the judge's eyebrows suggested he understood there might be more to the story, but he didn't press the issue. I see. He was quiet for a moment, then made his decision. Here's what I'll do. I'll issue a temporary order of emancipation, effective immediately, which will prevent Mr. Hargrove from forcing Miss Montgomery to return to his household. This will remain in effect until a formal hearing can be held. He looked at Willow. That hearing will determine whether the emancipation becomes permanent. It will be scheduled for next week, which will give you time to secure employment and appropriate lodging. Relief washed over Willow. Thank you, Your Honor. The judge wasn't finished. I should warn you, Miss Montgomery, that Mr. Hargrove will be permitted to present his side at the hearing. These accusations of mistreatment will need to be substantiated. Tucker spoke up. Wade and his wife can testify to her condition when they first met her, and Dr. Thompson examined her wrists just a few days ago. The rope burns were still evident. Judge Wilson nodded. Good. Those testimonies will help. He turned back to Willow. In the meantime, I suggest you speak with the school board today while you're in town. Securing respectable employment will strengthen your case considerably. I will, Your Honor. Thank you. The judge rose, signaling the end of their meeting. The clerk will prepare the temporary order immediately. You can collect it on your way out. His expression softened slightly. Good luck, Miss Montgomery. From what I've observed today, you appear to be a young woman of intelligence and character. I believe you'll make good use of your independence. As they left the courthouse, 30 minutes later, temporary order in hand, Willow felt lightheaded with relief. I can hardly believe it, she said as Tucker helped her mount Daisy. Just like that, I'm free of the Hargroves. Temporarily, Tucker cautioned, though he was smiling, but we'll make sure it becomes permanent next week. He checked the position of the sun. It's nearly 9. The school board meets at the church at 10. We have time to get some breakfast before heading there. They found a small cafe on the square and ordered coffee and eggs. As they ate, Tucker outlined their next steps. After you meet with the school board, we should see about lodging, he said. There's a boarding house on Elm Street that caters to unmarried teachers and such. Respectable place, from what I've heard. Willow nodded, though the thought of living among strangers in town brought a pang of regret for the comfort she had found at Tucker's cabin. That sounds sensible. Tucker seemed to sense her hesitation. Unless. He began, then stopped, seeming to reconsider his words. Unless what? Willow prompted. Tucker met her gaze, something vulnerable in his expression. Unless you'd prefer to stay at my place. It's further from town, which would mean a longer ride to the school each day, but... He paused. But you'd be welcome, for as long as you want. The offer hung between them, carrying weight beyond its simple words. Willow's heart quickened. Tucker, I couldn't impose. It's not an imposition, he interrupted gently. It's what I want. He hesitated, then added more softly, having you there. It's made the place feel like a home again, not just somewhere I sleep. The admission touched Willow deeply. I've felt at home there too, she confessed. More than I have anywhere since my parents died. They gazed at each other across the small table, something new and fragile blossoming between them. Finally, Tucker spoke again, his voice low. I know it's soon. Too soon, maybe. But I care for you, Willow, more than I expected to care for anyone again after Rebecca. He looked down at his coffee cup, then back at her, his expression earnest. I'm not asking for promises, just Time. Time to see if what I'm feeling, what I hope you might be feeling too, could grow into something real. Willow's throat tightened with emotion. I care for you too, Tucker, and I'm not afraid of what that might mean. She reached across the table to touch his hand. But I need to stand on my own first. To know that I can support myself, make my own way. Does that make sense? Tucker turned his hand to clasp hers, his grip warm and reassuring. Perfect sense. You need to find your strength, not trade one dependency for another. His smile was gentle. And I'll be right here, whether you're living under my roof or not. The promise in his words gave Willow courage. Whatever happened with the school board, whatever the judge decided at the hearing next week, she would face it knowing she wasn't alone anymore. They finished their breakfast and headed to the church, where the school board was just gathering. Walter Wade greeted them warmly, introducing Willow to the other board members, the mayor, the bank president, and two prominent farmers from the area. Miss Montgomery comes highly recommended, Wade told his colleagues. She's educated well beyond what we typically find in these parts, thanks to her parents' dedication to learning. The board questioned Willow thoroughly about her knowledge of various subjects, her experience with children, and her views on discipline and education. She answered confidently, drawing on the principles her father had instilled in her and her own love of learning. By the end of the interview, it was clear the board was impressed. They conferred briefly. Then the mayor, acting as chairman, addressed Willow. Miss Montgomery, we would be pleased to offer you the position of teacher for the remainder of the term through Christmas. The salary is $40 per month, with the possibility of renewal for the spring term if both parties are satisfied with the arrangement. Willow's heart soared. Thank you, gentlemen. I accept with gratitude and promise to fulfill my duties to the best of my ability. Excellent, the mayor replied, beaming. School begins Monday next. You'll have the rest of this week to familiarize yourself with the schoolhouse and materials. As they left the church, Tucker's proud smile warmed Willow to her core. Congratulations, teacher, he said, tipping his hat to her with playful formality. $40 a month is a good wage. You'll be able to support yourself comfortably. I can hardly believe it, Willow admitted. A week ago I was bound in a corn crib, certain I would die there. And now you're free, Tucker finished for her, with a future of your own making. They spent the rest of the day in Harper, arranging for Willow to rent a small room at the boarding house on Elm Street, visiting the schoolhouse where she would teach, and purchasing a few necessities she would need for her new life. By the time they began the ride back to Tucker's cabin in the late afternoon, Willow felt both exhilarated and exhausted by the day's events. So much had changed so quickly: her legal status, her employment prospects, her understanding of her feelings for Tucker and his for her. What will happen at the hearing next week? She asked as they rode side by side along the trail that led back to Tucker's land. Hargrove will make his case for why you should remain under his guardianship, Tucker replied. He'll likely claim you're being led astray, that he was only disciplining you for your own good. But the judge will hear testimony from Wade, from Dr. Thompson about your injuries, and most importantly from you. He glanced at her. Just tell the truth, Willow. Your strength and character will speak for themselves. Willow nodded, drawing comfort from his confidence in her. As they rode in companionable silence, she found herself thinking about the future that was taking shape before her teaching in Harper, living independently for the first time, and exploring the feelings growing between her and Tucker. By the time they reached the cabin, the sun was setting, painting the prairie in hues of gold and crimson. Tucker helped her dismount, his hands lingering at her waist a moment longer than necessary. Tomorrow, I'll help you move your things to the boarding house, he said as they walked toward the cabin. Though there's no rush for you to leave, if you'd rather wait until closer to the start of school. Willow considered this as they settled on the porch to watch the sunset, a ritual that had become precious to her over the past 2 weeks. "I think I should establish myself there before school begins," she said finally. "Get accustomed to the town, prepare for classes." She glanced at Tucker. "But I'd like to come back here on weekends, if that's all right. The boarding house only provides meals on weekdays." Tucker's smile was warm. "More than all right. This place will always be open to you, Willow. Always." The promise in his words wrapped around her heart like a gentle embrace. As the last light faded from the sky and the first stars appeared, Willow felt a sense of peace and possibility that had been absent from her life for far too long. The week that followed was a whirlwind of activity and adjustment. Willow moved into her small but neat room at the boarding house, introduced herself to her fellow boarders, 2 unmarried shopgirls and an elderly widow, and spent her days at the schoolhouse, reviewing texts and preparing lessons for her students. Tucker rode into Harper every other day, ostensibly on business but primarily, Willow suspected, to check on her and to ensure Silas Hargrove hadn't caused any trouble. The Hargroves had been noticeably absent since the night they had appeared at Tucker's cabin, but both Willow and Tucker knew they were likely biding their time until the hearing. On Saturday, true to her word, Willow rode Daisy, now officially alone from Tucker, until she could afford her own horse, out to Tucker's cabin for the weekend. The sight of the modest structure nestled against the rise, smoke curling from the chimney, filled her with a sense of homecoming that surprised her with its intensity. Tucker was waiting on the porch, his face lighting up when he spotted her approaching. He helped her dismount, his hands strong and sure at her waist. "Welcome back," he said simply, but his eyes conveyed much more. The weekend passed in comfortable companionship. They cooked together, rode out to check on Tucker's cattle, and spent evenings on the porch while Tucker played his fiddle. It felt natural, right, as though they had known each other for years rather than weeks. On Sunday evening, as Willow prepared to return to town for the next day's classes, Tucker brought up the subject of the hearing, scheduled for Tuesday. "Wade will testify first thing in the morning," he said as they sat before the fire. "Then Dr. Thompson, then you. I'll be there too, though I doubt the judge will call me as a witness given my—" He paused, seeming to search for the right word. "Given your interest in the outcome," Willow suggested with a small smile. Tucker returned her smile, acknowledging the truth in her words. "Something like that, yes." "Are you worried?" Willow asked, studying his face in the firelight. Tucker considered the question. "Concerned, maybe. Hargrove strikes me as the type who doesn't like to lose, especially not to a woman he considers his property." His expression hardened. "But Judge Wilson is fair, and the evidence is on your side. I believe you'll get your permanent emancipation." Willow nodded, trying to share his confidence. The prospect of facing Silas in the courtroom filled her with dread, but she was determined not to show fear. She was no longer the helpless ward dependent on his grudging charity. "Whatever happens," Tucker continued, his voice gentle now, "know that you're not alone in this. I'll be right there with you." The simple promise meant more to Willow than elaborate declarations might have. Tucker Reed was a man of his word, solid and dependable in a way few people in her life had ever been. "Thank you," she said softly, reaching across the space between their chairs to take his hand. "For everything." Tucker's fingers tightened around hers, warm and reassuring. They sat that way for a long time, connected by the simple touch and the deeper understanding growing between them. Monday brought Willow's first day of teaching. To her relief and delight, the children of Harper proved eager to learn, respectful of their new teacher and refreshingly direct in their curiosity about her. "Miss Montgomery, is it true you were rescued from bandits by Mr. Reed?" one bold 10-year-old asked during the midday recess. Willow stifled a smile at the embellished version of events that had apparently circulated through town. Not exactly, Thomas, but Mr. Reed did help me when I was in difficulty, and I'm very grateful to him. The children seemed satisfied with this diplomatic answer, and the day proceeded smoothly. By the time the last pupil departed, Willow felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Teaching, she discovered, suited her even better than she had hoped. The children's eager minds and honest responses reminded her of the joy her father had found in his profession. That evening, as she prepared for bed in her small room at the boarding house, Willow found herself thinking of Tucker, wondering if he was sitting on his porch alone, looking at the same stars visible through her window. Tomorrow would bring the hearing that would determine her legal status, but somehow the outcome seemed less crucial than it had a week ago. Whether the judge granted her permanent emancipation or not, she had already found a measure of independence and purpose that Silas Hargrove could never truly take away. With that comforting thought, she drifted into sleep, dreaming of wide open prairies and a cabin nestled against a gentle rise, smoke curling from its chimney in welcome. The courthouse was crowded the next morning. Word of the unusual case, a young woman seeking legal emancipation from her guardian, had spread through Harper, drawing curious onlookers. Willow sat beside Tucker in the front row, her back straight despite the nervous flutter in her stomach. Across the aisle, Silas Hargrove sat with his wife and two eldest sons, his expression stern and righteous. Judge Wilson called the court to order precisely at 9 o'clock. After explaining the nature of the case and the legal principles involved, he called the first witness, Walter Wade. Wade's testimony was clear and compelling. He described Willow's condition when he first met her at Tucker's cabin, the rope burns on her wrists, her weakened state from lack of food and water, the evident fear she displayed at the mention of returning to the Hargroves. Dr. Thompson followed, providing medical confirmation of Willow's injuries and malnutrition. As a respected physician in Harper for over 20 years, his matter-of-fact assessment carried significant weight. When it was Willow's turn to testify, she rose on slightly unsteady legs and made her way to the witness chair. After swearing to tell the truth, she faced the courtroom with quiet dignity. "Miss Montgomery," Judge Wilson began, "please describe your life with the Hargrove family since becoming their ward 5 years ago." Willow took a deep breath and began to speak. She described the gradual shift from strict discipline to outright cruelty, the increasing isolation as she was forbidden to socialize with anyone outside the family, the punishments for infractions as minor as speaking to a neighbor or reading a book not explicitly approved by Silas. "The corn crib was his favorite punishment," she said, her voice steady despite the painful memories. "I was confined there 7 times over the years, usually for a night, but the last time Mr. Reed found me was different. 3 days with minimal water and no food, my hands bound behind me." She held up her wrists, where the marks of the ropes were still faintly visible. "All because I accepted the loan of a book of poetry from the schoolteacher in town." Throughout her testimony, Willow kept her gaze fixed on Judge Wilson, avoiding looking at either Silas or Tucker. She needed to tell her story clearly, without being influenced by Silas's intimidating glare or Tucker's encouraging presence. When she finished, the judge thanked her and called Silas Hargrove to testify. Silas took the stand with the confidence of a man certain of his rightful authority. "Mr. Hargrove," the judge began, "what is your response to these allegations?" Silas smoothed his beard, his expression one of aggrieved virtue. "Your Honor, the girl has always been willful and prone to exaggeration. Yes, I disciplined her when necessary, as is my right and duty as her guardian. The incident with the corn crib was regrettable, but she had directly defied my instructions by consorting with a stranger, a man of questionable character, who had been giving improper attention to several young women in our community. Willow bit her lip to keep from protesting. The schoolteacher had been nothing but professional and kind, offering the book as an educational resource, not as part of some improper advance. And you consider 3 days of confinement, bound and with minimal sustenance, to be appropriate discipline for accepting a book? Judge Wilson asked, his tone neutral but his eyes sharp. Sila's shifted slightly. Perhaps the duration was excessive, he conceded. My wife and I were called away unexpectedly to a revival meeting. We had intended to release her after one night, but circumstances prevented our return as planned. I see, the judge said. And the other incidents Miss Montgomery described, kneeling on corn kernels, withholding meals, restricting her movements and education, do you deny these occurred? I deny they were cruel or unusual, Silas replied firmly. The girl needed a firm hand. Her parents had filled her head with all manner of unsuitable ideas about women's education and independence. It was my duty to correct these notions and prepare her for her proper role as a Christian wife and mother. The questioning continued for nearly an hour, with Silas maintaining his position that all his actions had been justified by Willow's supposed defiance, and his responsibility to guide her moral development. His wife testified briefly, supporting his version of events while avoiding direct answers about the specific punishments Willow had endured. Finally, Judge Wilson called for closing statements. The county prosecutor, representing Willow's petition for emancipation, spoke first. Your Honor, the evidence clearly shows that Mr. Hargrove abused his position as guardian, inflicting physical and emotional harm on a young woman entrusted to his care. Miss Montgomery has demonstrated her capability to support herself through respectable employment and her maturity in navigating these difficult circumstances. We ask the court to grant her petition for permanent emancipation, allowing her to live as an independent adult despite being several months shy of her 21st birthday. Silas's attorney followed, emphasizing the legal authority granted to guardians and suggesting that Willow's flight with Tucker Reed cast doubt on her judgment and moral character. When both sides had finished, Judge Wilson addressed the court. I will consider all testimony and render my decision after a brief recess. Court will reconvene in 30 minutes. As the judge left the courtroom, a buzz of conversation erupted. Tucker leaned close to Willow. You did well, he said quietly. Spoke with clarity and dignity. The judge saw that. Willow nodded, though anxiety still churned in her stomach. Silas twisted everything, she whispered. Made it sound as though he was protecting me rather than controlling me. That's what men like him do, Tucker replied, his voice hard. But Judge Wilson is shrewd. He sees through such tactics. When court reconvened, the room fell silent as Judge Wilson took his seat. His expression was grave as he prepared to deliver his ruling. Having considered all testimony and evidence in this matter, he began, I find the following. First, that Miss Willow Montgomery has been subjected to treatment that exceeds reasonable discipline and constitutes abuse under the laws of this state. Second, that she has demonstrated the maturity, intelligence, and capability to manage her own affairs, despite being some months shy of her 21st birthday. Willow's heart began to race as she realized the direction of the judge's ruling. Therefore, Judge Wilson continued, I hereby grant the petition for permanent emancipation. Miss Montgomery is recognized as a legal adult, free to make her own decisions regarding residence, employment, and all other matters pertaining to her life and well-being. He turned his gaze directly to Silas Hargrove. Mr. Hargrove's guardianship is terminated, effective immediately. He and his family are ordered to have no further contact with Miss Montgomery without her explicit consent. Relief washed over Willow in a dizzying wave. Beside her, Tucker squeezed her hand briefly, his own relief evident in the gesture. Across the aisle, Silas's face darkened with anger. He rose abruptly, ignoring his attorney's attempt to calm him. "This is an outrage," he declared loudly. "The girl is under my authority until January." "No judge can change God's natural order, Mr. Hargrove," Judge Wilson said sharply. "You will control yourself in my courtroom or face consequences for contempt. My ruling stands. This court is adjourned." With a final bang of his gavel, the judge rose and left the bench. Silas stood fuming, his wife tugging at his sleeve while his sons glared across the aisle at Tucker and Willow. "Come on," Tucker murmured, guiding Willow toward the side exit of the courtroom. "Let's avoid any further confrontation." Outside in the bright September sunshine, Willow took a deep breath, feeling as though a great weight had been lifted from her shoulders. "It's over," she said wonderingly. "Really over?" Tucker nodded, his expression a mixture of relief and something deeper, more personal. "You're free, Willow. Legally, officially free to make your own choices." The significance of his words wasn't lost on her. Now that her status was settled, now that she was supporting herself through teaching and living independently, the nature of their relationship could evolve without the shadow of her dependency hanging over it. "Let me buy you lunch to celebrate," Tucker suggested, offering his arm with a small smile. "There's a decent restaurant just down the street." Willow accepted his arm, returning his smile. "I'd like that very much." Over a meal of roast beef and potatoes, they discussed the hearing and Willow's first day of teaching. The conversation flowed easily between them, comfortable yet charged with new awareness of possibilities opening before them. "Will you come out to the cabin this weekend?" Tucker asked as they finished their meal. "I mean, if you don't have other plans in town." "I'd like that," Willow replied, meeting his gaze across the table. "Very much." Tucker nodded, seeming pleased but not presumptuous. "Good, I'll look forward to it." As they parted outside the restaurant, Tucker heading back to his land, Willow to the schoolhouse for afternoon lessons, there was a new certainty between them, a shared understanding that their story was just beginning. The next few weeks passed in a pleasant rhythm. Willow threw herself into teaching, finding deep satisfaction in the children's progress and their growing attachment to her. Weekdays were spent in Harper, immersed in her new responsibilities and gradually becoming part of the small community. Weekends belonged to Tucker and the cabin by the creek, where their relationship deepened with each visit. On a crisp October evening, nearly 2 months after Tucker had found her in the corn crib, they sat on the porch watching the sunset. The cottonwoods along the creek had turned golden, their leaves occasionally drifting down in the gentle breeze. Tucker had played his fiddle earlier, the sweet melodies echoing across the prairie as the day faded. "I received a letter from the school board today," Willow said as they sipped coffee, wrapped in blankets against the autumn chill. "They've offered to extend my position through the spring term, said the children are showing remarkable progress and the parents are pleased." Tucker smiled, pride evident in his expression. "That's wonderful news, though not surprising. You were born to teach, Willow." She returned his smile, warmed by his confidence in her. "It feels right, using the education my parents gave me to help others learn." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching as the first stars appeared in the darkening sky. Finally, Tucker spoke again, his voice thoughtful. "I've been thinking about the future," he said. "About this place, about my life here." He paused, seeming to gather his thoughts. "When I first settled here, I was just looking for somewhere to exist. Somewhere far from memories that hurt too much to bear, I never expected to find." He hesitated. "To find happiness again." Willow's heart quickened at the vulnerability in his voice. And have you found happiness? Tucker turned to look at her directly, his eyes reflecting the last light of day. Yes, because of you, Willow. These past 2 months, watching you rebuild your life, seeing your strength and determination, it's awakened something in me I thought was gone forever. He reached across the space between their chairs to take her hand. I know it hasn't been long and I don't want to rush you, but I need you to know how I feel. His fingers tightened gently around hers. I love you, Willow Montgomery. Not in place of what I felt for Rebecca that will always be part of me, but as something new and precious in its own right. Tears welled in Willow's eyes at the simple, heartfelt declaration. Tucker, she began, her voice thick with emotion. I love you too. For your kindness, your strength, your gentle heart. For seeing me as I truly am and valuing what you saw. Tucker's expression softened, hope and tenderness evident in every line of his face. He rose from his chair, still holding her hand, and knelt before her. Then would you consider marrying me? He asked quietly. Not right away if you're not ready. We can wait until spring or summer, give ourselves time to be certain. But I know in my heart that you're the woman I want to build a life with, to share this land and whatever future God grants us. Willow's tears spilled over, but they were tears of joy. Yes, she whispered. Yes, I'll marry you, Tucker raved. He rose then, drawing her to her feet and into his arms. Their first kiss was gentle, tentative, a promise of deeper intimacy to come. When they finally parted, Tucker rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed as though savoring the moment. I never thought I'd find this again, he murmured. Never thought I'd want to. Willow understood. They had both known profound loss, had both believed at one time that happiness was behind them rather than ahead. Yet here they stood, on the threshold of a new beginning neither had anticipated. When? Tucker asked after a moment. When would you like to marry? Willow considered. After the school term ends in December, she said. That would give us time to prepare, and I'd fulfill my commitment to the children. Tucker nodded, a smile spreading across his face. Christmas, then. A new beginning at the turning of the year. The symbolism seemed perfect, their marriage coinciding with the season of hope and renewal, just before Willow's 21st birthday in January. A fresh start, freely chosen by both of them. Christmas, Willow agreed, sealing the decision with another kiss. The weeks that followed were filled with quiet joy and anticipation. Willow continued teaching during the week and spending weekends at the cabin, where she and Tucker made plans for their shared future. Word of their engagement spread quickly through Harper and the surrounding farms, met with general approval and congratulations. Leaner Wade was particularly delighted, insisting on hosting a small gathering in their honor and offering to help Willow prepare for the wedding. Nothing elaborate, she assured them, just a few friends to celebrate your happiness. The Hargroves, true to Judge Wilson's order, kept their distance. Occasionally Willow would glimpse one of the younger sons in town, but they never approached her. The freedom from fear was perhaps the greatest gift of her new life, the knowledge that she was truly her own person, answerable only to herself, and soon, to the husband she had chosen. On a snowy afternoon in late December, Willow stood in Alina's guest room, looking at her reflection in the mirror. Her wedding dress was simple but beautiful cream-colored wool with delicate embroidery at the collar and cuffs, sewn by Alina and herself over the past month. Her mother's locket hung at her throat, and her hair was arranged in soft waves beneath a small lace cap. You look lovely, my dear, Alina said, adjusting the cap slightly. Tucker won't know what hit him. Willow smiled, a blend of nervousness and excitement fluttering in her stomach. I can hardly believe this day is really here. Sometimes I still expect to wake up in that little room off the Hargroves' kitchen, or worse, in the corn crib. Alina squeezed her hand sympathetically. But you won't. That life is behind you now, thanks to your own courage and Tucker's good heart." A knock at the door announced Wade's arrival. "Ladies, the minister's ready, and Tucker's pacing a trench in our parlor floor," Eleanor laughed. "Tell him his bride will be down directly." She turned to Willow. "Ready?" Willow took a deep breath and nodded. "More than ready." The Wade's parlor had been transformed for the occasion, with evergreen boughs and red ribbons decorating the mantel and windows. A small group of guests had gathered: teachers from the school, a few neighbors, and Tucker's friend from the cattle drive days who had traveled up from Texas for the ceremony. But Willow had eyes only for Tucker, standing before the fireplace in his best suit, his expression a mixture of awe and tenderness as she entered on Wade's arm. He had never looked more handsome, his usually weathered features softened by emotion, his eyes bright with love. The ceremony itself was brief but meaningful. They exchanged simple vows, promising to love, honor, and cherish each other for all the days of their lives. When the minister pronounced them husband and wife, Tucker's kiss was gentle yet filled with promise, drawing good-natured applause from their guests. The celebration that followed was warm and lively, with plenty of food, music, and dancing. Tucker even brought out his fiddle, playing a special tune he had composed for Willow, a melody that spoke of new beginnings and enduring love. As the evening drew to a close, they thanked the Wades for their hospitality and prepared to leave for Tucker's cabin, now their cabin, their home together. "I've been working on something," Tucker confessed as they rode through the starlit winter night, Willow seated before him on Ranger. "A surprise for you. Hope you'll like it." When they reached the cabin, Willow understood what he meant. Tucker had expanded the small structure, adding a second room and a larger porch. Inside, new curtains hung at the windows, and a comfortable rocking chair sat beside the fireplace, perfect for reading or sewing on winter evenings. "Tucker," Willow breathed, taking in the changes. "It's wonderful." He smiled, pleased by her reaction. "Wanted to make it worthy of you, of us." "It always was," she assured him, turning to face her new husband. "From the moment you brought me here, this place felt like home." Tucker's expression softened as he drew her into his arms. "And now it truly is." "Our home," Willow read. The name, her new name, brought a fresh wave of joy. This was real, this new life they were building together. Against all odds, they had found each other, rescued each other in different ways. As they stood before the fire in their home, husband and wife at last, Willow thought of the long journey that had brought her to this moment, from the grief of losing her parents, through the darkness of the Hargroves' cruelty, to the unexpected salvation of a stranger who had refused to ride past suffering. "What are you thinking?" Tucker asked softly, noticing her thoughtful expression. Willow smiled up at him, her heart full. "That sometimes the darkest moments lead us to the brightest futures. If I hadn't been in that corn crib, you never would have found me." Tucker's arms tightened around her. "I would have found you somehow," he said with quiet certainty. "Maybe not that day or that way, but our paths were meant to cross, Willow. I believe that with all my heart." And as he lowered his lips to hers in a kiss that sealed their new beginning, Willow believed it too. 5 years later, on a warm spring afternoon, Willow sat on the expanded porch of their cabin, watching as Tucker taught their 3-year-old son, James, to gentle a new foal. Beside her in a small cradle, their 6-month-old daughter, Rebecca, slept peacefully, her tiny hands curled into fists. The years had brought changes to their lives and their land. The cabin was now a proper house, with 4 rooms and a kitchen large enough for Willow to teach the children from surrounding farms when the weather made travel to the schoolhouse in Harper difficult. Tucker's herd had grown, allowing them to live comfortably without extravagance. But the greatest wealth in their lives was the family they had created together: James with his father's quiet strength, and his mother's love of books, and little Rebecca, named for the woman Tucker had loved and lost, a gesture that had touched Willow deeply when he suggested it. "Mama, look." James called excitedly as the foal nuzzled his outstretched hand. "She likes me." "She certainly does," Willow called back, smiling at her son's delight and her husband's patient guidance. Tucker glanced up, catching her eye across the yard. His smile, still capable of making her heart skip after all these years, held a warmth and contentment that reflected her own feelings. They had built something precious here, a home filled with love, respect, and the freedom to grow together. As the afternoon light bathed the prairie in golden hues, Willow reflected on the journey that had brought her to this place. The corn crib that had once been her prison now seemed like a distant nightmare, almost belonging to another life. She had survived, had flourished, had found joy beyond anything she could have imagined during those dark days. And it had all begun with a stranger's compassion, a man who had refused to look away from suffering, who had offered help without expectation, who had seen value in her when she had almost forgotten her own worth. Tucker was making his way back to the porch now, James perched on his shoulders, both of them laughing at some shared joke. As they reached her, Tucker set their son down and leaned over to kiss Willow, his touch as tender as it had been on their wedding day. "Happy?" he asked simply, settling beside her. Willow leaned against his shoulder, their children before them, their home around them, and the wide prairie stretching to the horizon, a vista of possibilities still unfolding. "More than I ever dreamed possible," she replied, and it was the simple truth.